Kia ora koutou, thank you very much for getting back here so promptly to the room. We were laughing downstairs going, well, they can't start without us. But again, thank you very much for your patience. And I hope that the first parallel session went well and that you're already starting to buzz with ideas. It is, again, my pleasure to be standing up here in front of you as part of a team. And I'd just like to introduce the whole team. We represent CBK, the Whanganui Central Baptist Kindergarten and Early Learning Centres, and the University of Canterbury, who has been in a partnership for, well, the research has been 3 years, but we've known each other for much longer than that, looking at how we can work differently and successfully in early childhood to work with families and communities. So you all know me, I'm Judith Duncan, and we have Royce Jew, Jenny, Maureen and Sandy. And we represent how many teachers in total? 23. So we've been a team of 23 plus extras like me. What we wanted to do today in this address to you this morning is not just talk about the research per se, because we're running really good workshops today, but we wanted to talk to you about why doing research in this area, or why even doing research at all, is quite important. So that's why we've called it Why Bother? As I've told you, we're a partnership. We also had Sarah Tione from the University of Victoria on our journey with us for most of the project, and we were funded by the TLRI. Now, for those of you who've been to a few of the gatherings, we've had quite a lot of presentations where our teachers have been talking about being parts of a TLRI. And what the TLRI stands for is the Teaching and Learning Research Initiative. Now, the wonderful thing about this funding, if you don't know about it, is it's out to combine teachers and professional researchers so that together we can bring the greatest strengths to investigate real issues that matter for teaching and learning in New Zealand. And they have been funding a range of educational projects for quite some years now. If you haven't seen any of the other projects, I do recommend that you look at their website, because there is a huge range of different ideas and really valuable teacher research for you to draw on. And in the interest of time, I'm going to miss all of that and get to Whanganui. Okay, Whanganui CBK is what it is now usually called, because Whanganui Central Baptist Kindergarten Early Learning Centre is quite a mouthful. So welcome to CBK. Now, it's based in Whanganui, and I've just given you some statistics there to show that Whanganui, as well as being an absolutely beautiful place with wonderful weather and fabulous people, also has some great social needs. And it's the reason that, one of the reasons why CBK for over almost 20 years has been working in their community. So as well as providing very good or high quality early childhood education for the community, their gaze has been much wider, and seeing themselves as a place, a good place to be able to provide services to their community, which includes the community of their parents and children, but also the wider Whanganui community. Now, I don't expect that you can read that up there, but what it's telling you is the range of services, the range of models, the range of perspectives that the CBK brings to its work with children and whānau. So when we started thinking about the research and we were successful in getting the funding for the research, we built on this already existing model that CBK had been using. Now, just to give you the background, CBK has 4 early childhood centres. It has a parent resource centre that you'll hear us talk of as 303. Now, it's called 303 because that's its address. It's 303 Wickstead. So much, what would be the term, more user-friendly to call it by its address. Again, that notion of trying to encourage inclusiveness, welcome, belonging that doesn't have some of the traditional stereotypes where parents might feel it could be a bit embarrassing to turn up. So very, very comfortable to say I'm just popping into 303 for a cup of coffee. CBK also supports these other programs which I'm sure you all know about, the Hippie, the Skip and the Space program. And they are also very fortunate to be positioned physically alongside the church, and so there's a range of activities and resources that can be used there as well. I think my battery's getting low. So our research was for 2 years. You'll all appreciate that over that 2 years we had some bumps in the road here. So our 2-year project became a 3-year project when I couldn't always go up to Whanganui. And our research question, which I think has caused us the greatest discussion over the 2 years. So how does active adult participation in early childhood education enhance positive outcomes for children and their whānau? Now, what we also wanted to know under that question was not only were we looking at learning outcomes for children, but we were also looking at building strong, healthy, resilient, well communities. So we just had these 3 objectives. We weren't being too adventurous. So we wanted to understand how active adult participation enhanced child learning outcomes. That seemed quite a straightforward question until we tried to do it. We wanted to generate successful models so that we could stand up in front of groups such as yourself and say, you too can do this. And importantly, we wanted to be able to see that we had made a difference in the community, that the work we were doing in early childhood not only made a difference to the immediate children and their whānau, but also made a difference to the wider community. So, as any practitioner research, it's really important that the methods that you use are useful, doable and applicable. So we developed, and you're going to hear more about these in our workshops this afternoon, these range of different approaches to answer our research questions. And if you look at those lists, they're all about connecting people, connecting thinking, connecting ideas. And between all of those 4 approaches to our research, we were able to use traditional methods and tools to ask very non-traditional questions about the work that we were engaging in. And at this point, I'm going to hand over and say, well, why did we bother to do all of this research? Okay, so you hold that. Mm-hmm. There we go.
Cool. Okay, I'm Sandy, and I'll just tell you a little bit about me at the beginning of our research project, where I was at. I was only in my 2nd year of teaching, so the idea of working alongside Judith and Sarah and doing research was could I say, whoa, scary. I was actually teaching at Kindy House, where it was children of 4 to 5 year olds. I was working in that centre at the time. I was one of a group of teachers that were working alongside Judith in pockets of time when she came up to Whanganui. We did some Skyping, we did lots of conversations and things, and so the time I spent with Judith was very valuable. And then I got to thinking about, well, you could ask yourself, why bother? Well, why not? So I came up with gains, challenges and changes, and those aha moments that came along whilst working in the research project. The gains, there were 3 different levels. So on a personal level, it became a really useful time where professional development for myself. So I grew as a teacher. It also developed my confidence, like I am here with you today. And when I got first asked to perhaps be presenting at a group like this, I went, it's not me. So yes, I feel it's provided me with more confidence so that I can be able to share what we were learning. And as a team at Kindy House, I'm working closely, sort of being in the hub of where the research was happening. It enabled me to help our Kindy House team who may have had queries and things. So gaining a good understanding of what was happening, what was required for our teachers to do, and gathering data. Perhaps the teacher diaries that they started off with, what sort of information was required. So working closely with Judith enabled me to help on a team basis. And then the wider CBK is we all gathered together, being asked to share what I had learnt working alongside Judith in the research. So that was quite valuable for others, and to make those connections with other teams and teachers in the other areas where they're teaching different age groups. So those were the gains that I wanted to share, and the changes that happened. They were initially we had case study children and families, and so one of the things that we started was we gathered up all their learning profiles and we're documenting children's learning, parent participation, how that was seen through the profiles, and anything that linked into their input into the centre or the learning that was going home. So that was all bullet pointed per child, and we took some of that from the learning stories. And what I found was that while we were going through the profiles for the children, I would hear Judith's little voice going, that's a nice learning story, but where's the learning? So in some cases it was hard to find. And so the change that happened was when we all came together as not just a teaching team, but the administration, people in the office, the manager, people down the road at 303. We all came together and we all had different input, different stories, different conversations with parents, different times of learning with the children. So when that was all pulled together, we'd go child by child, family by family, and when that was all pulled together, we got this huge picture of about that child and their learning, how it progressed over a long period of time. So for example, for one child, they started when they were 2 at creche. So we began with the creche team who told us where that child was at, how their family participated in the centre, what learning was going home, and then we'd move to the next age group, kindergarten, and do the same thing. So the kindergarten teachers would say, oh no, that was a bit different when they came to us. The child was more confident in themselves. They were growing relationships. They were building on what they'd done at creche. The parent was more confident. They were asking more questions. And then we'd get to kindy house, which is the 4 to 5 year olds, and we'd see by sharing all that information that there were great changes in positive parenting. They'd been to courses, they've learnt more, asking more questions, sharing more. The child's progression of learning had gained. They were more independent. Just this one example of one child. So we did that for all of our case studies. So the change that I'm trying to explain is that when we gathered together as a big group of teachers and other staff, that brought about much more evidence, or much more a better understanding of where that child and family fitted, and their progression of learning over a big span of time, not just creche and not just kindy or kindy house, but right through from the day they started to the day they left. So that was a big change in for a lot of teachers being able to see what happened next, because as they left their centre they didn't know what happened next. The next one is challenges, and this is more about I'd not long been teaching, and so showing learning in the profile for families. One particular incident was I talked to Judith about the difficulties a child was having with relationships. One particular, there were two boys, great friends. Oops.
No, we're all sitting so interested.
Okay. They started at creche, best buddies, but it was a sort of one of those love-hate relationships, you know. And as they started off, the friend of the boy that I was recording the learning for, his learning was starting with using his vocal words to express himself, to help play continue. And as they came through to kindy, and then kindy house, where I was, it had taken a full circle. So the young friend was now using strategies to remove himself from play when things weren't going quite right. And he would call that thinking time. He told his friend, the one that I was doing the learning for, I'm just having some thinking time. And so this upset this other child that I was doing the learning because he thought that his friend didn't want to play. So we would talk about, let's go and ask your friend and see, you know, is he okay? And his friend said, yes, I'm fine, I'm just having some thinking time. So that would sort of make him feel a little bit better. Then his next problem was that he didn't have anyone to play with because his best buddy was having some thinking time. So then we looked at how could he find some other children to play with in the sandpit. So he was quite happy about that. And when he was busy playing, I talked about what he could learn from his friend. So initially his friend was learning from the one I was doing the learning for, because he had the vocal understanding. He could express his feelings about what was not going right in their play. And this time he was learning, well, okay, thinking time could be a good thing I could use when things go to custard. And I was asking him to think about how he could use that. You could learn from your friend. So when things do go, just see if that will work for you. Take some time out, have a wee think, and then return to play. Talk about it with your friend. What went wrong? How could we make it better? But the challenge was, how do I put that in a learning story? And I looked back and I didn't put the difficulties in that the children were facing. I focused on the learning and the outcome. And Judith said to me, well, how do you know where they started? How do you show the difficulty and how they got past that and beyond that? So the challenges were for me to rethink and say, well, how am I going to put that so that parents understand, and that I don't want to upset anybody about the difficulty side of things. So I managed to rethink it, rewrite it, and I put everything in that happened, and that the feedback from the family was that it was a very valuable thing to read, that they could see how the relationship had evolved, gone full circle. One child was learning off the other at the beginning, and then at the end the second child was learning off the first. So it was a really cool, big learning for me as well, how to do that. And then we go on to the aha moments. One of them was thinking about community, and for a lot of us it was seeing CBK as the community, whereas it turned around where we are only just a tiny weeny part of the family's community, and that could be quite different for each family. And an example of how we try to connect, make that community connectiveness, was we have made observations of another wee girl who was 4 years old, and we saw great differences in her confidence. Confidence inside was really high, could play, interact with other children, knew what she wanted to do, and it was very positive. Her confidence in the outdoor environment, she would be found clinging to a teacher. It would take some time for us to even encourage her into an activity outside. So we talked to the family and found that she has no outside environment like you would have in your backyard, that they live in a flat. And then we thought about the planning of that. How are we going to help that child and that family get connected to another part of the community where that learning could be fostered? And so the teacher talked to Jenny at 303, and they have a group that goes to a park, a fun park in Whanganui. It's a beautiful park, and they have different families gather on a Wednesday afternoon. And so we thought we could use that as a way of connecting this child and family to help with the planning of her becoming more confident with others in an outside environment. Our teacher is giving up some of her teaching time to go and make those connections. She is familiar with the child and the family, so it seemed easier for that move from centre to another place would happen better with the relationships that have been formed with the teacher and the family. So that's what is about to happen, is that the next Wednesday that teacher and that family will go to the park, make those connections between the families that already participate in that area, and hopefully the learning outcomes will be that that child will be much more confident in an outside environment, one that she can get to other than CBK, the centre, something that can be happening in the weekends, and making connections with other families. So it was that idea of community and the connectedness that we can help happen with the outside community, not just CBK. Those are my aha moments, and that is why you should bother.
Kia ora, my name's Maureen Thomas. At the time of the research, I was team leader in kindergarten. That's the third in age spread of our 4 centres. I worked with a team of 5, and myself included in that 5, and I led and supported my teachers through as we took on the research. And we took on the business of bothering to research. I was also one of the lead teacher researchers in the project. One teacher from each of the 4 areas became a lead researcher to work in contact and communication with Judith and other members of the research team, and to help to nurture and support our teachers in all the 4 centres as we took on the research and grappled with the questions. Reflecting back over the research time for us, I identified that the most important points for a team of teachers when you're taking on research is questioning, reflecting, reviewing, and also seeing, getting an insight. Questioning. As teachers, we always have lots and lots of questions. First of all, the research question, which is up on the screen. How does active adult participation in early childhood education enhance positive outcomes for children and their whānau? We had lots of team discussion, and we gave this lots of time at the beginning of our research involvement. We discussed, we debated, there was a torrent of questions as we worked out as a team, what does the research question mean for us? What is participation? Who are the adults? What does active participation mean, and what would we think it looked like? What do we need to see and notice? Positive outcomes. Which outcomes are positive? Is that our spin on it? We have to take ourselves into the eyes of the children and the eyes of the family. What's positive outcomes for them? Children and their whānau. How extended is that? Who are we welcoming into the centre? Lots and lots of questions. So we spend a lot of time exploring the question at the start of our research period to find out what it meant for us, how do we interpret it, and what are we going to be looking at? What is research? If we're going to be researchers, what is research? What are we going to do? We needed lots of time to ask questions early on. What does this mean for our teaching practices? Do we have to start doing things differently? What are we going to be looking at? We came to the conclusion that we're going to be just looking more closely at what we do. And we're going to get more insight into what we do. And there's going to be more discussion and more talking and more reflection on what we do. On to the reflecting. The research question and the discussions that followed led us into reflecting much more deeply on our own practices. We were revisiting our centre philosophy, our existing philosophies, our visions, and determining where do these things sit with the research question? Where does it sit with our current policy statements and our beliefs and practices? Policies such as the welcoming policy, the departure policy, the transitioning new children into kindergarten, transitioning children from the kindergarten to the kindy house. Where does the research question sit with that? Do these policies support it, or do they need to be amended and changed as we grow and learn? It was heavy stuff. Our discussion started initially through our weekly team meetings, but we found that soon that wasn't enough, and this discussion was quickly filtering through into daily discussions at the beginning of the day when we were trying to, I've thought of this overnight, what do you think? And at the end of the day, something that has come up during the day that needed to be discussed before we could leave the centre. And in our thinking and practices, so many times during the day, teachers would be discussing things that they'd witnessed or seen or were reflecting on in relation to our research involvement. Reviewing. As teachers, we developed a heightened awareness of the concept of adult participation, and this soon became a lens through which we viewed our practices. We were identifying ways that our policies and daily routines could better support adult participation as our awareness grew, and things started to look quite different to us, and we realised that we really did have on a research lens. Seeing. Our lead researchers worked on developing use of a mapping tool in our centres, and that was a tool that we used to collect and record on paper data of adult movements and interactions in each part of our areas, each area of our centre. We took a map of the centre, and the lead researcher would be released with a covering teacher taking her place on the floor to record adult movements on the map in different time slots. And what we ended up with, we tracked and recorded where the adults went and where they stopped and had interactions with teachers and with other people. What we ended up with were great big plans of our centre showing what happened over that period of time. Who came, who went, where they went, which areas were used, which areas were not used, and how many interactions were happening and where they took place. There were also notes by the researcher at the time at the side which just further explained that. When I showed these to the teachers in each area, they became very excited. Oh, this is where our research has taken us. We can see what today looked like. It was a visual record of the movements and the interaction points. This led to much further debate and many, many more questions. It led to teachers getting excited about the environment and suggesting environmental changes that we could make to alter the flow of movement patterns in the centre. So it was very exciting. Changes were made to the environment in the centre, moving things around, and we remapped. We used the mapping tool again to have a look and see how patterns had changed. We were able to influence the way that people were using our space and the way and where people were interacting. Research had become very relevant to our practice. The teachers were using the research to inform their practices. So we are really glad we bothered.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou, I'm Jenny, and I come with a different lens. I come from a parent perspective, really. I coordinate what we call 303, which is our parenting centre, alongside Central Baptist. And it was part of the pilot from the Parent Support and Development, which is where I first came into contact with Judith, and I thought, oh bother, she asks darn good questions. And she does. And so that's, I guess, what got me thinking about research and the need, as we were working through the Parent Support and Development, that this really needed research. We needed to know if things that we were doing were impacting, were making a difference. Was what we were doing, what we were learning, could it be replicated somewhere else? So that was kind of what kind of got me thinking about research. We got to this place where because of the cap that I wear, I could be in two places at once. So I was not at once, but listening in two camps, that sounds better. Listening to teachers and their kōrero, I could hear that they thought that, CBK was where it was all at, and this is what, parents are going to fit in to a CBK. That was great. Yep, heard that. And then I'd go and listen to parents at a kōrero group or a forum, and they'd be saying, oh, I suppose the teachers have a little part to play in our children's education. So I got to that place where it was like, oh bother, this is going to be really interesting. We've got what the teachers think this, and our parents think this. So that was really early in the journey, and that was quite eye-opening for me, because I knew that we had lots of work to do to get to a place where we could work together on this project and on this research. The who for me was around teachers, that teachers initially were connecting with parents, and they were perhaps initiating a lot of that connection and that conversation with parents, and that was great, that was good, but I wondered if there was more. And because of my ability to be able to move around in centres, I could see what was happening too, so I had that outside lens, a little bit like Judith coming in as well. So again, it provided questions for me. And then the tools that Maureen's spoken about, and some of the learnings that Sandy's spoken about, and the tools that Judith spoke about, all came into play, and we developed more and more skills. And what happened was that teachers and parents deepened their relationships. So teachers might have initially initiated, but parents began initiating additional conversations with teachers. And that was a whole time frame that happened. Then there was another move that happened, and that was that teachers and parents were really connecting really, really well, but what was happening to parents connecting with other parents? So that was another one. So we looked at ways to help that happen, and some of the things that we do in our centres are events and talking opportunities, lots of different ways that we explored, one of them being the visit to the park on a Wednesday afternoon. All of those different options that we explored and tried to find ways that our parents could connect with other parents. So teachers began that task of connecting parents with other parents and making links that perhaps parents weren't able to do at that stage, but now they can do that as well. One of the things that we also did was add in a parent into the mix who became our parent-to-parent coordinator. She was our connector person, and her role was to connect parents with each other. So she's great. She was great at doing that. We've had a year of that last year. We've got a new person in that role this year, and she's seeing it quite differently. She's approaching it from a different angle, but it's all about connecting parents with parents. So there's been a lot of bother happening around that. Sandy alluded to the flip in her kōrero, but one of the exciting outcomes from the research for me is our new framework that we see, that we have a new lens at CBK, and it's about how can we at CBK be involved and add to the learning and what is happening for the child and their whānau, their family, and where they sit in their community. So for us it's been a flip. One of our teachers said this week, it's not about CBK and what happens at this centre, it's about how our tiny little bit at CBK fits and adds to their communities. And for me that was like, yeah, that's cool. So life goes on. Our people stay at our centre till they move on. Some of our families are connected for a long time when they have multiple children, but it goes on, and we know that when families leave CBK that they have special memories and feelings about their time at CBK. But we're now intentionally striving to connect families with other families, knowing that this creates community in a much more sustainable way. The relationships formed at CBK continue. They move into the wider community. Life goes on. So why bother? Oh bother. Why bother indeed? It's been a journey and it's been good.
Bothering. I think they had me as the botherer when we were discussing this at one stage. In terms of manager in of the centre, and so the first word that came to mind for me in the bothering to do research was what a huge investment by the whole team. Absolutely huge. Far greater. You can see it's dear to my heart. Far greater than anybody imagined. Research, put your hand up, and wow. And I became very aware early on, as overall responsible, that this was a huge ask. And I think we have, as you can hear today, weathered that extremely well. And the investment, if you think in terms of investment, something where you're investing in something really precious, really important, children's best interests and families, whānau's best interests, absolutely the bottom line for everything that we do at CBK. And so together we invested, and we realised very early on that this was a team effort, and pulling together as a team was what was an investment for long-term significant change at many different levels. So from a personal level, you've heard that coming through this morning. Each one of us would say the personal, professional development and learning that we got through doing research is absolutely huge and ongoing. For the impact that it had to the centre, absolutely huge in terms of practice and on many different levels. I'll come back to that at the end. There were many ahas along the way for us all in the journey. And in particular, I'm thinking of a teacher in a recent appraisal where we talked about, you know, what had been the most significant professional learning in her recent times, and she just stopped for a moment and she said, I would have to say that the research has been the most fantastic professional development I have done. But not only that, she said it pressed in on the very area that I knew that I needed to work on and perhaps felt a little reluctant, and that was in parent partnership, and of course that was hugely at the centre of what we did. So again, those personal ahas along the way. I think another one that has been alluded to was the switch to seeing the family, whānau, at the centre of everything we did. Probably if we went back and listened carefully to our language, at the beginning of the research project, we would have been talking about the child at the centre, but there was a very definite change and shift along the way with those ahas at many different levels. You can imagine with 23 teachers and supporting staff for the holistic wraparound service that we have, that those ahas happened in different ways and at different times. And we all celebrated and were excited as they happened in the different ways along the way. So that deepening, I guess, of collegiality as we dug deeper in the research project. Making a difference at all levels, at lots of different levels, personally, for the children, for the families, and it also was very complementary to our own self-review. Our self-review, I would say, has exponentially increased because of research, that this was like a really intense self-review, but the exciting thing was it complemented the many different in-depth reviews that we were doing anyway. And to think of transition review, you've probably got a bit of a picture, as you've heard, that there are quite a few transitions in our centre. We were already looking at that in our review, and now the research just added hugely to our learning and our questioning and reviewing of all of that. And also our profile review that we were in the middle of, and that has continued to be a really interesting one. And with the research question and the things that you've heard Sandy particular talking about, it has really added to our self-reviews. Timing. Timing is really, really critical, I think, in terms of taking on research projects. We were encouraged a few years earlier to actually pick up some research when Centres of Innovation, but there was quite a strong sense within our leadership that we weren't ready. I'm really glad we listened to that, because the timing was right for this research project. And I guess the testimony to that is the fact that with such a large group that we all stayed together as a team and were inspired by one another and kept going in the research. I think that is a huge achievement, and I'm sure that had a lot to do with the right timing, the readiness to take on research, even though it stretched us all hugely. Ownership was another one that I wanted to highlight, because there was a particular time at the end of the first year, what we would consider another one of those aha or turning point moments for us as a team, when we trialled a lot of things in the first year, and then we got together with Judith and Sarah and everybody, all together, all teachers, the whole team, and we explored what we'd trialled, how that had worked, And then the invitation was given, and we thought this was fabulous, that, you know, people often have a picture of researchers coming in and doing things to places, but it was never like that. It was a partnership, and this particular opportunity was a real high moment and a turning point where suddenly there was this wonderful enthusiasm by everybody about the opportunities and the fact that everyone was involved in the planning, so the ownership came really strongly at that point before we went into the next phase. And that was fabulous. The fact that the earthquake then came soon after that leads to the next point of momentum, because there's always a silver lining, isn't there? And I remember at the time being aware of this wonderful momentum, wonderful ownership that we had, that suddenly we were kind of, okay, so we just have to put this into, just hold it for a while, because with Judith not being able to come and be with us, that we just had to pause for a while. So that provided another challenge. And so how were we going to keep a momentum going? How were we going to keep the research question alive during that time? I think it turned out the fact that really it was a 3-year relationship and like a 3-year research project in the end, because we kept the question alive amongst ourselves. We trialled some of the new things we'd been thinking about in that time, and it added to our practice, it added to our thinking about the research question. And I believe that when we went into that next phase, we were more on board, more prepared, and I think that added to successful outcomes. So the provocations along the way, again, it kind of connects to, I love the word provocation, it's that Reggio concept too, isn't it? And years ago, a group of us, when our heart beat about a holistic wraparound service, did a trip to Reggio Emilia and then King Green around all of this. And I remember us coming back as a team and thinking, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could get to that place of having those robust professional discussions where we could put stuff out and grapple with it, and yet nobody felt defensive or whatever if a new idea or new concepts were put out, or questioning of perhaps the way we're doing it may not quite. Is there another way? Is there a better way? Should we be looking at something else? And I believe the research was absolutely fabulous in that because it provoked our thinking. It enabled us to come to that place. And some of that was the timing as well. We were ready at that point to have robust professional discussions. And so it built our confidence in asking questions and not to be fazed by that. And now that is just part of our DNA, that we enjoy having robust discussions and questioning our practice, and don't feel that it's any kind of criticism of anything that we're doing. So that was a huge reason for why you would bother doing research, yet another one. So really, to sum up, it has strengthened us as a centre. It has strengthened us on all sorts of different levels, and it has caused us to revisit and revisit and revisit and question and question and question. And we have found, here we are at the end of our research project, and we are living the research question, and that's quite an exciting place to get. The research question being, so we're living at CBK and continually challenging each other that adult participation in an early childhood setting enhances positive outcomes for children and community wellness. We live that in Whanganui.
So we just like to finish off with showing you a short video clip. As part of the research project, we have produced 4 10-minute video clips, and we just have a little bit of paperwork to finish on them, and then they'll be made available on YouTube. So if you like what you're seeing in these clips, in about a fortnight they'll be up freely available on YouTube for you to use in your teaching teams, with your communities, with your whānau.
How does active adult participation in early childhood education enhance children's learning and community well-being? That was the question motivating a 2-year research partnership between Whanganui's Central Baptist Kindergarten and the University of Canterbury's College of Education. We found that increasing adult participation in early childhood education involves intentionally focusing on the adults in the environment as well as the children, and creating a new learning tradition focused on active adult participation needed the involvement of all the people, places and other resources at CBK.
People today don't have the same community that we might have had years ago, and they may not know their neighbours. So what we're about here at CBK is establishing a nurturing and caring environment where everyone feels they have a place to be and to build community, providing lots of different things that encourage parents to engage with other parents. And there are many ways that we do that with 303 Parent Centre, with our SKIP initiative, with the hippie program that we brought to Whanganui 10 years ago, seeing identified gaps there in our community where parents can be in places feeling supported and interacting with other parents. So we have done a lot of that to build community, and in turn, if you're building community and parents are feeling good about what's happening for them and for their child and meeting other parents, developing relationships, that has that ripple effect into just well-being for everybody, family well-being.
You've got the Parent Centre at 303, and you've got SKIP just upstairs, and you've got Hippie just above the church, and you've got the church there as well. You know, it's just, everything's all organised. Most families like to be organised, so it's, you set out for the day. I think CBK has that down to a T.
303 is our parent support centre, and it is informal, and each day is something different, and we encourage parents from the CBK but also the community to be involved.
Teachers have become more intentional in introducing parents to parents, and linking parents with, if they've got hobbies or interests that are similar. The children's friendships are very important. I see this particularly by the time they're at Kindy House, that there are a lot of friendships have evolved, and sports venues, so a lot of the community things, parents link up with other parents from CBK.
I'm just thinking of a little episode a couple of weeks ago where 2 children knew each other extremely well, but the parents had never met. So being able to say to the 2 parents, this is da-di-da and this is da-di-da, and these are the children because they're great mates at kindy.
We connect parents to each other as well, thereby strengthening families. For example, an Asian family who didn't have any relatives here in New Zealand, and another Pākehā family who had recently shifted here, and both were quite lonely, and so we connected them together, and now they've become firm friends, so much so that one of the families was shifting house and the other family helped.
The kids have formed really good friendships with other like-minded families, so you find that people you know in the community who've got similar interests. Their children come here, and for instance, Henry's still got he's still a very good friend with little Fraser. They don't go to the same school, but you know, they spent their time together here, and they still see each other and carry that through now. We know other farming families that have come here, and you know, when you're bumping into each other every day, and the kids are friends, and yeah, you tend to be at the same stage of your life and do the same sorts of things. So yeah, it's quite nice.
My husband also feels completely accepted as a dad. Like a lot of times the childcare in the family is the mum, but he does pick-ups and drop-offs, and with other dads that he's met through kindy and made friends. He went along one day and helped build, and all these dads got together and built something, and there's photos of it in all the kids' profile books. And I think he went to a Wacky Wednesday. They sat him outside under an umbrella on a toilet, and there's photos of that. And, but never made to feel uncomfortable. He just, you know, it was, yeah. So it's mums and dads and grandparents.
It's taking an interest in the whole family, and you know what's happening for that family individually. Whether that be, I'm just thinking it might be a new baby's been born, so you know a congratulations card will go out. It may be families who have had a bereavement in the family, so we can, you know, if we find that out in conversation, we can send a meal. And again, just our condolences. So it's as teachers, coming alongside families, having those conversations and going just that little bit deeper.
Saturday will be his birthday.
Okay.
Yeah, 27th.
27th June. Yeah. Has he started during the holidays?
Probably for me as a team leader too, I used to have lots of conversations with all of the families in our area, because that's part of my role as a team leader as well. And I've seen the other teachers be more empowered to do that too, not just to specific ones that they might click with, but to everyone. And then when we come back as a group, we're having more conversations about the snippets in the relationship that we have with those families, and that's different for everybody as well. And it's just like more pieces being added to a bigger picture. And we've also sort of discovered the importance, not just for the child and all that sharing, but for the family. Being able to reflect back to the parents on what they're doing at home and how we're seeing the benefits for the child is really encouraging to their parenting.
The other role that we've got is parent to parents and us encouraging people to events. So we've just had the PO event, or those bigger events that we encourage parents to come to, and they kind of know that there's going to be a CBK presence that is less scary for some parents. And a lot of our parents go on to, so it might be Hippie, or it might be the Incredible Years or Boundaries for Kids, so parenting programs, because once that relationship's connected, they feel perhaps more secure to pick up other challenges in the wider community. So building that bridge first and then linking them to wherever Hippie or counselling or parenting programs, whatever it is, that we're able to do that reasonably successfully.
We also do a huge amount of networking with agencies and services so that we can support, encourage, advocate for families when they're needing those other services or wanting to access those other services.
So we look for solutions with parents. It can be from a car park conversation, it can be a gate conversation. Often they happen at the end of the day or at the end of the session. Parents all want to have a little bit more in-depth conversation, so it usually happens then.
I've had a lot of support, and that has benefited my family directly because I'm a better parent and we're a better family because of it. And yeah, I'm very grateful to the centre.
I guess at the centre is the family, and it's the family rather than just the child. We are here about the child, that's wrong, but we hear about the child and where they sit in their place at home, in their place in the community. So it's seeing them in a bigger context perhaps.
So, if you'd like to know more about the research or find out more about it, there's a couple of websites up there. We've also put in your pack a summary of our research, so you've got a little 6-page summary of it all. And as I referred to earlier, of course, there's the book. So, thank you very much, and I'll just hand over to Tui.
Thank you. Thank you to Royce, Judith, Sandy, Jenny and Maureen. I'd just like to make 3 important points in terms of capturing what we've just heard. One of the exciting things about the presentation that we've just had, and I'm sure it was strategic in terms of Judith's choice of presentation, is that of course what we've just heard very much epitomises the kaupapa of the gathering, the joining of research and practitioners to share amongst a mainly practitioner audience. And so thank you for that, for the research, practitioner, academic link and combination, which really beautifully captures our 5-year birthday. The second point I wanted to make was in relation to the research question. How does active adult participation in ECE enhance positive outcomes for children and their whānau? Again, this is a key focus for us all, and something we're all striving to answer and respond to. You've provided a really strong model in what you've presented for what active adult participation looks like and what some of the many positive outcomes for tamariki and for whānau are. One of the key points that arose for me from what you presented was the point around intentionality and being intentional in what we do. And I'm sure all of us, whether we're in tertiary, whether we're in a centre setting, whether we're in a ministry or any capacity, that intentionality certainly has a lot of meaning. My third point that I want to make in acknowledging you all as a team is that whilst there are enormous benefits, obviously for everyone at CBK and 303 and for the wider Whanganui community as a result of this research, there are also enormous spin-offs that I'm sure you've started to hear about and you're discussing amongst yourselves in terms of, for us, whether we be in tertiary settings, in ECE settings, in the many contexts that we work in. And for me, a personal and professional example is having heard Judith and Sarah Tione present this research previously, is that we have at the New Zealand College of Early Childhood Education in developing a new degree drawn on this research in our assessments. And it's the notion of spaghetti junction and the adult's role in terms of teacher training that has a very strong link. And that's just one link from one person in this room. And I'm adamant that there will be, and you will be sitting here having made a link to what we've just heard. And for that, we thank you profusely. We wish you all the best with, I'm sure, what has been an incredibly tiring but rewarding journey. And we wish you kia kaha, kia maia, kia manawa nui. And perhaps we can etu and sing and acknowledge this group with Tu Tira Mai. And I'm not going to leave Tu Tira Mai. Toru wha. Tu Tira Mai na iwi, tatou tatou e. Tu Tira Mai na iwi, tatou tatou e. Ai atu marangatanga, me te aroha e na iwi, i aputahi,
Thank you all very much. Now I know you'll all be interested in lunch. So I hope you've all found your way to and from, so it's the same route. I'd like to suggest that we do cut our lunch short a little bit in the interests of those who are presenting this afternoon. So if we could be back in our parallel sessions at 1:15, if that's all right with everyone. So go, enjoy,